a new amendment. If you picked up the old one, that one's going to be eliminated, and we have a new one that, no,
Madam Chair, what's the number of the new one, if you could?
yes, it's 1111,
That was, no,
right?
no, it's this one,
It's this one.
1162.
Sorry, 1162.
Can't believe we're entertaining this.
Don't,
Why is this in Ways and
hi, how you doing? I'd like to call the meeting to order. If I could, today we are going to be, this hearing is on the non-germane amendment. Amendment 111H is what was available as of last Thursday. And since that time, we have adjusted the amendment so that the amendment we will be discussing today is 2022-1162. Okay, and if you don't have a copy of it, Mr. Landrigan has plenty of copies out there. So, since my name is on the amendment, I guess I will turn the mic over to Representative Weiler and will present the amendment.
will recognize Representative Umberger to present the non-germane amendment 1162 to House Bill 1661. Representative Umberger.
I don't like getting this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And members of the House Finance Committee. HB 1661, which this is an amendment to, was dealing with career technical center education agreements, and the amendment was, well, I'll just say that we had a work session in Division 2 this morning on HB 1661, and although we did not have a vote on it, there was no one that objected to what that particular bill was providing. So, what this amendment does, the first thing is the motor vehicle registration fee rebate. And what this is that for every registered vehicle in the state that registered from 1 July 2021 through 30 June 2022 will receive a $25 rebate on their registration fee. So that's pretty simple. Obviously, the mechanics of that will need to be worked out with safety, and I know that Mr. Lavoie is here and will be more than happy to discuss what he projects is how we will do it. But you can see on line 14, it just says that the rebate check will be sent to the permanent mailing address on file with the department. So hopefully people that may have moved need to get their address corrected with safety. The second, paragraph 7 is that the appropriation is that we anticipate there's currently 1.6 million registered vehicles of one type or another. And so it's estimated that this will be some place around $40 million to provide this amount of money, the $25 to each registrant. Number 8 is the creating a new parking garage. For those of you that may park down on Store Street, you know that that garage is in terrible condition. And we are spending a lot of money every year just to make it semi-safe. And it is not in a condition at this point where it makes any sense whatsoever to repair that parking garage. So the proposal that is here is to build the parking garage right out there. And it's currently houses the Justice Department. And we are appropriating the sum of $35 million towards this. Now, not all of this $35 million is going to just build the parking garage. We have to raise the building that is currently there. We have to move the people that are in there to another location, and we also have to get rid of stores, tear that down. So that's what the 35 million is all about. And I know it says the appropriation shall not lapse, and I agree with that. But I do think that we need to add a sentence there that says any money not expended on this project will lapse to the general fund, or whatever those right words are, Mickey. So, and I know that that you can take care of that without any problem. So, are there any questions that anyone has on this? I'll be happy to answer them.
Any questions from the committee members? Representative Turcotte for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the testimony. Couple questions on, start with the item 6 and line 9. Could you just explain what is the purpose behind instituting this rebate, first of all?
Yes. As you know, we started out with the concept of a gas tax rebate. And we found out that it was going to require 92 additional people to monitor or manage the gas tax rebate. And we also figured out that somebody would get maybe $10 if you were driving a regular passenger car. And so we felt that with all of the administrative costs and the amount of gas tax rebate, that probably was not the most efficient use of the money. And we also looked at rooms and meals tax. And we found out, I knew it, but I forgot, that we have an obligation for $700,000 a month for a bond. So that didn't make that didn't make a lot of sense either. And so as we worked with safety, this was one of the areas that we felt we could manage without a lot of extra cost and provide our residents with, you can call it gas tax relief in a different form. And so we believe that this was the best way to provide that relief to, and we also knew that by doing this, that the only people that would receive the rebate would be New Hampshire residents. So that was why we chose to go this way.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the answer. And the next question would be, I notice it's a fixed $25 cost, or $25 for each vehicle registered. The first question, would a business that has a 18-wheel truck be eligible? And then the second question, was there any thought given to making it a percentage of the vehicle registration, so that somebody who pays $1,000 to register versus somebody who pays $100?
Every time you add something like that, it costs money, extra money. Your first question was, will the owner of a registered semi receive the $25? The answer to that is yes. But the minute that you start adding complexities into how you are going to provide the rebate, it just simply adds more administrative cost.
Any further questions from the committee members? Representative Turcotte.
Just a question to the
Turcotte.
chair. Will there be somebody testifying, I hope, regarding the raising of the garage?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, there will be. There are people here. Well, we have a stack of cards. But yes, we have people that will speak to both number 6 and no, paragraph 6 and paragraph 8.
Seeing no further questions, thank you, Madam Chair. We'll next call on Speaker Sherm Packard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm just going to address 8. I'm not going to address the rest of it. It came to our attention in the office that the Store Street parking garage was at maximum had a lifespan of 5 years and more likely about 3 years left. So this put the issue of a new parking garage pretty high on our menu that we had to put on the fast track. And as I heard Representative Umberger talking, I mean, we had to find a place to move the Attorney General, and we had to obviously find a new building. So there was a lot of pieces of the puzzle that had to be put together. Some have suggested maybe we wait until next year and maybe bond the $35 million. We can't wait another year to put this on hold to see if it's going to happen. We need to move forward now. We've got an opportunity to move the AG, and we've got a building that will work. They've looked at it. I haven't had a chance to get over there yet, but they have been done a tour of it, and this new facility will work. So I talked to Karen about putting this in the amendment because I do not believe we can wait another year. I don't want us to be in the position 3 years down the road of not having a place for our members to park. We're looking at a 600 space parking garage that will cover all of the, I mean, we're still going to have the LOB, you know, the upper and lower, and probably some street parking, but this will get, you know, a good portion of our people off the street. You know, the architects have looked at it, and the obviously the money, we're estimating that the $35 million will cover the destruction of both Store Street and the building now and building the new garage. Do I want to spend $35 million on a parking garage? No. Do we have to? Yes. It is getting critical. You didn't want to ask me any questions anyways, did you, Ken? I did not. No, go ahead.
Many members did not have the ability. Any other questions from the speaker? Representative Turcotte.
Chairman. Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker.
Good afternoon, Representative.
Just one question. What's the anticipated timeline from planning till
The best estimate we've gotten so far is 2.5 to 3 years. That's for moving, you know, moving the AG out, the destruction of the garage, the planning purposes and all that. I mean, that's the estimate we have right now is 2.5 to 3 years. So that's putting right now Store Street at just about its ends of its life cycle at that point. And that's why I don't believe that it's prudent to wait another year to see if we want to put this in the capital budget and move forward, you know, in the next session's budget.
Further questions?
appropriating the entire amount up front, maybe putting out X amount for the first year for planning, demolition, or whatever, and then X amount in the following year?
I've thought about that, Representative. I'm not sure if we could delineate it. Maybe we could. You know, again, it's going to be, you know, our decision, the legislature's decision, whether we want to use the money we have available to us now or we want to. I mean, I'm just throwing figures out. Take 15 million, you know, right now, and then bond the other 20 million. I guess that, you know, would probably be an option, but I'm figuring if we've got the money to pay for it, let's pay for the thing and get it over with.
Any further questions from the committee members?
Sorry, one more. You just brought up something. Is any of this money coming from the feds? From the, whether they call them the PPL funds or?
Some of it might. I mean, it's something that obviously we have to sit down and figure out all the details right now, Representative. And unfortunately, we're at the position of our session right now where, you know, all the pieces aren't in place right now, but it's something that I did feel we could, like I said, I didn't feel that we could wait.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Wallner for a question.
Thank you. Thank you. Have you been in conversations with the city of Concord officials?
Yes, we have. We've already, Mr. Paff has been in conversations with the mayor, and we've got the go-ahead, you know, from the mayor and the town manager. So they want Store Street back as much as we want to get rid of it. So, yeah, we've been in those conversations.
Thank you.
Further questions from the committee members? Representative Lynn for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I guess the only question I have, really the question is I have no idea what the answer might be, but is there any risk that if we actually appropriate the 35 million, that because we've done that, there would be, we would somehow lessen our ability to use any of the federal money for this purpose?
I can't honestly answer that question. I'm sure you have people on this committee that are better versed in that than I am.
Any further questions from the finance committee members? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Next call on Chief of Staff, Terry Pop.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Terry Poff. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the General Court. I've got a little, and I'm here to support the amendment, non-germane amendment. The funding is a policy decision the General Court will have to make. But the goal of the General Court's always been to work in conjunction with the Department of Administrative Services and the City of Concord to accomplish a new parking garage somewhere. Store Street is well documented about becoming end of life. The study committee's first study committee started in 1988, for instance. This one's working now. Okay, you should light up now. There you go.
Yes.
Okay,
You have fixed it. Thank you, sir.
thank you. So we're online now. So in 1988 was the first study committee, and they had a legislative parking facilities committee established by the General Court. 1993, there was the DOJ lot purchased, and that was purchased for $2.25 million, I believe, from the Hampshire Savings Bank. And that was when we established, also during that discussion in facilities, it was made mention that it was going to eventually work with the City of Concord on some sort of parking facility to migrate from Store Street. Now, for those of you who don't know, Store Street was built, and we obtained a lease from the City of Concord for the air rights to establish that parking facility. It was a lightly built parking facility out of steel I-beams and decking, and it was established to be actually moved and taken apart and moved at one point. And it had a lifespan of approximately 20 years or so. It's well exceeded that because it was built in 1974. Our air lease, we still have about 51 years left on the air lease with Concord. It was established for $1, got a good deal on the air lease. But currently, going to 93, we did talk about, at that point, establishing a cooperative effort with the city of Concord to establish a parking facility. Everybody knew in 88 it was a problem. They had another design and committee looking for parking facilities in 2004 again. And the acting chairman right now was on that committee, actually. So this issue has been well established that the facility is failing. It's gotten to a point now where the bolts are really on the foundations aren't even secure. They're rusted off, quite frankly. And the stabilization project was just that, just a stabilization project. It wasn't a rehabilitation of that garage. It didn't even really take into account much of the decking. Just prior to this rehabilitation, we actually had to condemn 4 to 6 spaces on there because there was debris falling from below them every time a car parked on it. So I think the establishment of the fact that Store Street is really rapidly approaching the end of life has been there. There's been several concepts done, and we worked with DAS to get us some RFP established in 2019. We had a meeting developed to re-engage an actual siting and an actual project development team put together to try to get the project off the ground and get a refocus on the parking garage itself. We pulled together the City of Concord, the Governor's Office, Department of Administrative Services, and the Department of Justice together in room 210, 211 in 2019, had a meeting there, and then we spun off from that to really get it going even further to get to a point where we put out RFPs and we had responses from engineering firms to establish a design at that point. Now, at that point, there was a design that was going to, and the concept was to include a portion of the garage site on DOJ to include some office space. At that point, we were thinking at the time and asking the engineers to develop a plan to include a space for DOJ, for some of DOJ, a space for legislative offices, and oversized rooms at that point we were considering, and then the pandemic hit. So that got kind of scuttled because there were other areas that were in play at the time around that State House Capitol Complex area, and that the pandemic put all that on hold and actually took some of those things off the table. So 2 years have passed since that point. The deterioration of Store Street has become to a critical need, as it has been for decades, really. But it's really to a point now that it's in a failure state almost. So that stimulated the re-energizing of this concept and project to build a parking garage there. The goal has always been to put something on that site, but one of the gates to doing that has been the DOJ resides there. So we had to find a conduit for them to go somewhere. So working with some local developers and looking at different spots. The problem is there's 58,000 approximately square feet needed for DOJ to relocate. That's what they're, I believe, currently enjoying, and that's what they would want to have in their new site. There's not too many places that have that kind of footprint around the city of Concord right now in one spot. And so what we looked at was what was satisfied by the Supreme Court and the administrative office of the courts was a facility over at 1 Granite Place that they had rehabilitated and entered into a 10-year lease with an option to buy. So that said, what's happening over there? It ends up there may be some opportunities in the south building of the same complex. So that's where we went to look. And so we brought folks together from the Attorney General's office, from the Department of Administrative Services, and did a review of that space. It looks like it may be a pathway to have those folks have a place to go. That being said, there's nothing tangible about that yet. It's still a negotiated and even an exploratory point at this point. And I'm sure the Commissioner of Department of Administrative Services will echo that. It's really conceptual right now. We're looking at it and looking at reaching out to the developer and seeing what can be done in that phase. And the Attorney General's office has also visited there, as I said, so they're looking at, what are the requirements, how would it be upfitted to, and what would the cost be associated for that. So then it comes to the actual construction of the garage. The garage is, we've had conceptual drawings done on what that's going to look like. It really is a capacity of approximately 600 or more spaces is what's going to be required on that footprint. The footprint and the ground underneath it has had surveys done to it to see what the grounds were like. We have all of those documents. It's not the best of sites, it's not the worst of sites. It's a wet site. Everything here is a wet site. You go down 9.5 feet on a drought year and you hit water here. So going below grade isn't really an option. You can always de-water a site. It gets to be expensive when you do things like that. So there are challenges to the site, nothing that I don't think that the engineers will not be able to overcome. The cost, of course, is up to, in this bill, indicates up to $35 million. So you look at a pre-pandemic cost from La Valley Benziger, we had estimates of 30 to 32,000 per space. And that was for a facility that would reflect the dignity and the nature of this historic district. So you could build a straight-out parking garage for much more economical, I think. But when you look at how it has to fit the neighborhood and what folks would be expecting from their historic capital district, I think you have some other things to consider. So the post-pandemic estimate was $40,000 a square foot from La Valley. That was pre-war. So the pre-war escalation and costs we don't even know about, except for it's reflected in some of the gas costs and some of the escalating costs for transportation. So generally, a parking garage is made with pre-stressed concrete these days. So it's basically like a Lincoln log set. There's 2 companies in New England that currently do those pre-stressed concretes, and there's approximately a 2-year lead time to get into the queue for those. So that's depending on design. And the other companies are out west, and transportation costs bringing those big pieces would be kind of ridiculous to engage those. Hopefully it won't have to happen once this gets to fruition. You asked about a timeline. We had talked with the folks and our partners over in Public Works and said, how quick can we do if we do a design for this and get engineers engaged? He said approximately 9 months, 9 or so, to get, because it's a parking garage. It's nothing really dramatic, but you do have to include EV sites. You have to include now, and the modern garages are designed with autonomous car sites, which are interesting because you can get more cars in there because you don't have to get out of them when they're driving themselves. So the things you learn are very interesting. Our clientele here in the general court, as you know, has an average age that's a little older than some places. And so you have to bring that into consideration too when you're looking at proximity and whether you have covered access over to the legislative complex, anything on our State House complex. So would that either mean a sky bridge, just a covered area, a tunnel perhaps? So those things are included into the design requests that would be put out as well to say what are the options for there. We've had many discussions with the city of Concord over the potential and possibility of perhaps closing half of Capitals to look at that to see whether there'd be a working park, an area that you could make something over or not. They've offered and consider that, and that's what we've discussed at one point. Nothing's written in any kind of engineering plan for that yet, but it could be a part of the overall complex when you look at it. So is this need been established? I think it's very well established, and it's almost bordering on continuing with Store Street becoming a liability. For those who don't know and don't happen to park over there, there's now double layers of netting there to protect the people who are parking underneath it and people who are traveling and going back and forth on Store Street to keep any kind of debris that may fall from reaching any of the people, cars, anybody transporting back and forth. So that need's been established. The costs are associated with this are $24 million or so for $40,000 per space costs. That would include a decent facade for it. Approximately $3.5 million to raise 33 capital. About 1.5 or so is estimated to raise the Store Street facility itself. And then the balance of that would be to look whether there's escalation costs, no escalation costs, whether there'd be a need to assist DOJ with the move, perhaps. Those things would have to be ironed out and facilitated one way or another. Is this the best process to get it going? It's the one the Speaker and Representative Umberger has endorsed. It gets it on the table. It gets the monies encumbered. It's one way to fund it. It's a policy decision you folks have to make about funding. I'm here to certainly discuss the need and the critical need for this critical facility and continuity of government, quite frankly, to keep them going and limiting liability, in my opinion, because that garage is rapidly becoming a liability to the state, in my opinion. So with that, I'll gladly field any questions and appreciate the opportunity to testify.
A lot of talk without a script. Congratulations. Representative Murray for a question.
Thank you, and thanks for taking my question. I'm just kind of curious, are there new regulations pertaining to new garages with regards to a certain number of EV spaces or a percentage of EV spaces, given the size of the garage?
I'm not qualified to answer that at this point. That would be an engineering and design feature. I do know that we, in the general court, went forward and did establish, along with our partners in DAS over at the new boiler plant where the Green Street parking is. We have 4 EV level 2 chargers over there currently. And so, but it is, I believe it's going to be future-proofing is what I like to call it. When you future-proof something, you really look ahead and see what's going to be established, and what the needs are going to be, and try to predict those needs. And certainly EV cars and trucks, if you look at all the major manufacturers, that's where they're headed.
Further questions from the committee? Representative Lynn for a question.
Yes, you mentioned that the in terms of where DOJ is going to go, you mentioned One Granite Place as one possibility. I guess the only thing that would concern me is if it sounded like from what you were saying that seemed like it was maybe the only place that was big enough or suitable enough. And I guess my question is if it's not kind of clear that that's actually going to work out, do we run the risk of having to, we sort of commit to tearing down the building across the street and then we have to build another building for DOJ?
Thank you for the question, Representative, Mr. Chairman. I think that those are some of the things that you have to discuss. I don't believe the new building would be required to house those folks. I think you could find them spaces. It's whether you keep them whole or not. If you keep them in one spot, obviously One Granite Place has a south and a north building. I don't think that you'd want to commingle the Department of Justice with the Supreme Court or the AOC or anybody that may move in there on behalf of the court system, because they have some separate ideas and tasks and missions. So I think that there's space and smaller square footages probably available, but they would separate them. These days, everybody works electronically, so whether that would be problematic or not, I'm not sure. But to find someplace consistent with that kind of square footage in the city is pretty much negligible here right now. You can't find it. You can go to the mall up there, and that's probably the only places that have something around 50,000 plus square feet. So, would you have to build a new building? I don't think that that's in the books to do right now to house DOJ, but it's something I doubt would happen. Or
Thank
have
you.
a need.
Representative Mooney for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Pfaff, for your testimony. Have any personal injuries or damage to property been reported over the years because of Storrs Street? I'm fully aware of its condition, but I'm curious as to whether or not any have been reported, or we're just anticipating that as a matter of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Quite frankly, Friday was our most recent report of an injury. It was a trip injury on the ramp coming from Storrs Street's top deck. We've had several reports of trip and falls over there. We've had reports of cuts on the rails from the rust, people using a handrail for its intended purpose. The handrail is not in the appropriate condition, therefore it cut the person's hand. So I've had regular reports of things along those lines. I've had reports of people locked into the stairway towers because the doors don't function, because of settlement, because of hinges falling off. So it's a constant issue over there. Its proximity from the complex even though we have cameras to be able to view that. We've had vandalism over there. We've had concerns from members and had them escorted over there when they work later at night. And you folks do a lot of your work in the winter. So a lot of times it's dark when you leave, even at 4 o'clock. We've had to escort folks over there because of their concerns for their own safety. We gladly do that with our protective services team. So there's an array of issues from the proximity of that garage, the condition of that garage, and to answer your question specifically, just as recently as Friday.
Representative Hatch for a question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to go back to the Department of Justice and where they're going. Has there been some exploration by them or anybody in terms of placement? Because this is happening rather quickly in our terms, so I'm just curious.
Thank you,
Mr.
Representative
Chair.
Hatch, Mr. Chairman. Yes, in fact, we did have a discussion. We've had some meetings as recently as last Wednesday. The Attorney General and his Chief of Staff and Commissioner Arlinghouse and his assistants have and members of his team have met with us here at the General Court in the Webster Room, as a matter of fact. And we've had an on-site visit to the potential site to see and do a walkthrough and a condition assessment of it. So we've done some exploratory efforts because the gate, quite frankly, is that they're still occupying the site where is the best potential to place the new garage.
Well, I didn't question your due diligence. Just wanted
Thank
to
you.
hear it. Thank you.
Seeing no further questions from the committee, thank you, Chief.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Appreciate the time.
We'll next call on Commissioner Arlinghouse from Department of Administrative Services, who's going to be accompanied by Karen, say the last name.
Rantamaki?
Ah, that was my guess.
That's a good guess. Well, you know who I am. You just introduced me. So I'm the Commissioner of Administrative Services, and Karen is here because she's the Director of Plant and Property. And she's an engineer, whereas I've never even tried to drive a train. And to talk about only...
Excuse me, could I have your last name again, please? I wasn't writing fast enough.
Karen Rantamaki, Director of Plant and Property.
Thank you.
And we are only going to talk about Section 8 and nothing else. Before we start, I want to say the Store Street garage is not semi-safe, it's safe. And I think that's an important thing to say. We would not operate a garage that was semi-safe. I know what you were saying. I don't want anyone to think that they're in imminent danger, that there are any problems. It's perfectly fine. That's an important thing. Otherwise, we would put a gate at the end of the ramp and you wouldn't be allowed into it. So there are a couple things, and I'm not here to vouch for the $35 million. That estimate was developed without our assistance, and I can look into that. And if you wanted to talk about engineering at some point, we could have Public Works talk to you about the process. We did do, as Terry mentioned, we had meetings in 2019. There was and at that time there was a thought about following the traditional legal Department of Public Works process for building a garage, and there were meetings with design selection. We actually picked a design firm, consisted of an architect and then also a garage firm, for lack of a better word, and then we canceled them a week later because there were questions about other options downtown. And I don't know all the details, but there was a thought about DOJ somewhere else and building a garage. So what I would love to do is, if you go forward with this process, and I understand that your intent is to not follow the traditional Public Works process and just have the legislature do it on its own, which is fine, but it would be great if you gave some credence to that process, just because we invited 5 or 6 different companies to come in and spend enormous amounts of time and money to make a presentation to us. And in the back of my head, I can't help thinking, we did that, we should at least do that. If you want to build a parking garage, and that's your choice, on this site, you have to tear down that building. If you want to tear down that building, you have to get rid of the people in it or do it on a weekend. And they have to have somewhere to go. The moving cost to move the Department of Justice would be roughly, and this is a ballpark estimate, 1.25 million. And that's derived based on an extrapolation from the cost of moving OPLC and everyone else who was in Philbrook last year. But it's a good ballpark number, 1.25 million. That's a real number. It is true that there is almost no space in Concord that would suit 50,000 square feet. The only one is the old Lincoln Financial Building, known as One Granite Place. We did both tour that facility 2 weeks ago-ish, somewhere like that. It's about 100,000 square feet. There's a lot of space. You'd have room for other people to go into it. My understanding is the purchase price would likely be in the neighborhood of $20 million to buy that building. I don't know what the leasing cost would be, but the buying cost is about $20 million. If you don't do that, I don't know exactly where else they go, but you'd have to break them up and move them about. And we don't have extra. The state manages about 2 million square feet of space in Concord in terms of office space, not counting corrections and hospitals and stuff. And we don't have extra. There's some buildings falling down that probably should fall down that you could try to convert, but that's kind of where things are. That's sort of the big picture on that part of it. I can't testify without talking to Public Works in greater depth about how many years of life the Store Street Garage has left in it.
Ms. Remtemaki, anything?
Nothing to add, thank you.
Questions from the committee members? Must have been very complete. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, next call upon Representative Graham, Chairman of Public Works.
Not often I'm at this end of this committee room. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, I am Representative John Graham, Hillsborough District 7, and as the chairman said, I'm the chairman of Public Works. I actually came up here because I was more concerned about the amendment that we're not discussing and how that was going to work with the rebates of the gas tax. I'm going to talk about both, Mr. Chairman, if you'll let me.
All right.
No,
she wants
I'm
to
not
just
staying.
talk about the
I
garage.
have
and
another
then-
commitment that I have to be at.
All right. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll talk about the garage. Over the last couple of terms, we've sunk some money into Store Street to keep it so that it is usable, and that's all been bonded money. I want to reiterate what the speaker said about let's do it with cash. If we bond $30, $40 million to do this, it will impact our next capital budget. We do about $130 million a year term in capital budget expenditures. If we take a quarter of it for a parking garage, there will be needs within the state that are not met. So if we have the cash, let's use cash. Let's not let anybody in this body or the other talk about bonding it if we can. I would appreciate that. That's about all. We do need to do it. And nobody, I don't think, is going to say we want to try to fix stores. It's just not going to work. If we are talking about additional monies for another building, we'll have to talk about that, whether that should be included in this or we talk about it next term to buy another building for DOJ. But that's another big chunk of money if we're talking, as was just said, $20 million. And I would ask that at some point we ask Public Works, Commissioner Charlie Ellinghouse's people, to actually look at the costs to make sure that $35 million is going to cover it. With escalating costs, we just don't know. So we should do that, but we need to move forward with this and get it to the Senate, and that can be done in the Senate, since we only have a week and a half left of our work. On the rebate, as I said, I came up to talk about the other. I just want to make sure that when we're talking about the rebate, that it means that whoever has paid the registration going forward too, has paid it, and that the 12% that goes to cities and towns is being taken out and giving it before they get the $25 back. Because that's important for all of us, because that maintains our local roads, which was part of my concern with the other suggestion. But this works, and having talked with safety, I know it would cost a whole lot more to do rebates than to do the registration rebate. But that's all I wanted to say, Mr. Chairman. Didn't mean to be abrupt about I have to go, but I do. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah.
I'm going to assume that many of the other cards talking about the parking garage, I want to go through those testimonies before I get to the rebate on the registration. I was going to next call on Steve Lavoie from the Department of Transportation. But he's going to talk about the DMV. So anybody else, I'll come to you, Steve, but let me see if I've got everybody that wants to talk about the parking garage. Speaker Jasper wants to say something, or Commissioner Jasper wants to say something about parking garage. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. I'm really here as a former speaker, maybe a little bit into my role as commissioner and how the parking relates to the department. I'm not going to reiterate what you've heard from the previous speakers. I think you all know that the parking garage is beyond its life span. I'm really pleased to hear that that double netting was put there only for aesthetics and had nothing to do with safety. So that's comforting. That parking garage, when I got here to the legislature, I was elected in 1984, so the parking garage was only about 9 years old. It's interesting to note, when we talk about average age, that after all those years, I'm still younger than the average member of the legislature. I got a few more years to go to catch up to the average. But this is not a project that was just thought up recently. When I was speaker, this was something that my then chief of staff, Terry Poff, and I were very concerned about at that time, and I've been out of the speaker's chair for 4.5 years at this point, and we'd been talking about it for longer than that, and that was the site we were considering at the time. You know, I believe that everybody understands we need to have a new parking garage. Everybody has for probably decades. The problem is we keep getting into these details of, well, where's DOJ going to go? You know where DOJ started out many years ago? The Speaker's office. Speaker Roberts told me that when he was the majority leader for former Speaker whose name escaped, Marshall Cobley, Marshall sent him in to say to Warren Rudman, who was the Attorney General at the time, do you want to move now or after Christmas, or before or after Christmas? Moved over, actually, interestingly, into the office that I now occupy in the annex. So moving the DOJ around is something that has happened several times, and that can't be our primary concern. You know, not only from the safety concerns that you've heard about, from the fact that we have a volunteer legislature. What we've been asking them to do for all these years by walking, a block and a half is disgraceful. You know, this is something that should be done anyhow. When I was a young clerk of the Judiciary Committee, I had a parking space right out in front of the annex. And over the years, we've had more and more people elected to the legislature who have walking disabilities, and now the clerks can't have those spaces. And in fact, the city's been very gracious over the years, and I want to thank the mayor for his cooperation during my time as speaker, and even now as commissioner, we've had to turn to him a few times for some help. But the city shouldn't have to constantly give up that revenue because we don't want to do what we know we need to do. We let the details drive this discussion, and so we move decade after decade. Someday that garage is going to be unusable. And then what are we going to do with our members? Let's worry more about what we're going to do with 400 members. If the parking garage becomes unusable, then, all right, what are we going to do with the DOJ? We can solve that problem. We can solve that quickly. We won't be able to solve the parking problem quickly at all. So I would encourage you, even though we know this is not a perfect plan, that it's come in late, we have time to fix it. Going to have time, even in the next session, if this isn't perfect, to make adjustments to a plan. But now we have the cash. You've heard that, look, we're going to affect other capital projects if we bond it. We don't need to do that now. We just need to bite the bullet. We need to do what has needed to be done for well over, in my estimation, 30 years at this time, and have a permanent solution so that all the members of the legislature are treated equally and with the respect they deserve, not have second-class legislators. And in fact, that is what we have by the way we have dealt with this. I'll be glad to answer any questions, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you.
Okay, does anyone else want to comment on the garage? Dan McGuire. The Honorable Dan McGuire.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Dan McGuire. I'm from Epsom, and I'm here today on behalf of Granite State taxpayers, the state's oldest statewide taxpayer organization. So we're opposed to this parking garage on a couple of different grounds. One is process. I know you heard from the chair of Public Works who thinks this is just fine, but in fact, this is a capital project. And the legislature has a very good procedure for capital projects, which is they do a biennial budget, and all of the different projects get considered by the Public Works Committee, who look at those things year after year and have a lot of experience in judging one project compared to another. This is a building that would be around for who knows how long, 40 years or more. And it's a capital project, and it should be part of that process rather than as a legislative special thrown in here for a very quick vote. Financially, I do think this is a time to consider borrowing. We're in a time of low interest rates and high inflation. So borrowing is something to think about, even pushing the limits of the normal capital budget next time. Then there's the overall cost of the project. You're adding a considerable amount. I mean, I understand that location would be great for the comfort of the legislature. There's no question about it. But that location adds a huge amount of cost to the whole project. The 3-point-something million to tear the building down, the 1-point-something million to move the Department of Justice, the extra 3, 4, 5 million to make it look commensurate with the neighborhood, the aesthetics of the thing, and so on. I don't know if they've considered an alternative of simply replacing the parking garage at its existing location, right? That wouldn't have to be fancy, could be built as an inexpensive as possible parking garage. That's not a location that needs any special architecture or whatever. So that's something to consider. Then you wouldn't pay, you would keep this building, you wouldn't have to move anybody, all those kind of things. That would certainly save, I don't know if it would save half the cost, but it might save a third or something. I mean, it would be a lot of money. And then the other thing to think about is more the sort of long-term aspect of this. There are technological changes in progress that would make a parking garage in particular kind of a white elephant long term. So I'm thinking of two things. One is self-driving cars. You know, it's not something that's going to happen next year or the year after, But 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from now, you're going to drive to a place, get out, and your car will go park itself somewhere, right? It doesn't need a garage nearby. So your estimate of when that's going to happen would have bearing on how long-term, do you really want the primo, beautiful garage that's permanent here, or is it something to think about? What's the temporary solution? What's the short-term, intermediate-term solution? Similarly, there's also virtual reality, right? That's something that's not there yet, but it's getting better and better all the time. And if it was to the stage where you could interact with other people as though you're sitting in the same room with them, I'm sure that there's plenty of representatives, hopefully maybe such as the chairman here, who doesn't want to drive 2 hours a day each direction to get here and do the work, So both of those things long-term speak to parking garages is not a good business to get into, I guess, is the best way I can put that. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Thank you, Dan.
Okay.
Now I will, okay. You want to talk about the garage? Yes, please. Okay. All right. Representative Horrigan.
Yes, I did fill out a pink card. I apologize if I jumped in too soon. So I'm Representative Timothy Horrigan. I represent Stratford County District 6, the towns of Durham and Madbury. And the new garage is long overdue, and I know it goes against our grain here in the legislature to spend money, especially to spend money on ourselves and also to spend money before we absolutely need to. But I think this project needs to be built, and it needs to, I think, the Honorable Terry Pfaff, who's a former state legislator, he said it right. That's like we're about 3 years from the building collapsing. That's about how long it'll take us to do it if we do it right. So I think 35 million is probably not an unrealistically high figure. I think we should go the extra trouble to build a good building, one that looks good and is structurally sound, not build it on the cheap like we apparently did. Well, it's almost 50 years ago that we built the building. I think it dates back to 1975 when my father was a member. And in terms of we should probably talk about future-proofing it. We should probably be making it expandable. I know we all have a wish list of things we might want to add to that site, and I certainly do. I would certainly say one particular priority is the expanding the system of tunnels from the State House. The tunnel connecting the LB to the State House, it's prone to flooding, and it's also extremely inconsistent with the Americans with Disability Act requirements. So that we could probably add a tunnel from the new parking garage to the State House annex across to the State House for a relatively small cost. And that I think also some versions of the plan have been considered putting offices or retail space in there, which is worth considering. And I've even thought a good idea would be to keep the Reps Hall just as the historic Reps Hall and build ourselves a slightly larger facility to meet in. I think we found out in the last couple of years, even though it cost a lot of money, it was inconvenient to meet off-site. There was more space, and that was helpful in a variety of ways in terms of doing our work on session days. Res McGuire brought up virtual reality. I think it's a long time before we'll be ready to do that, even though I've worked in virtual reality. And certainly we already have the Zoom technology, which we could theoretically have used. I'm a Democrat. Our party has a lawsuit saying we should have used it, but we made a decision that wasn't suitable for our needs, and that's it's going to be a few years before we're ready to make a different decision on that one, and that still doesn't obviate the need for us to gather in person. I don't think it'll ever replace that, and So I think we should go ahead and start building the garage. When I drove here today, I drove behind the new grandstand for the football stadium, and that costs $25 million plus a few $1,000,000 for other ancillary processes. And that's a fairly simple facility, but it looks good. It should last them a long time, and I think the same is true for the parking garage, which I think is a project of about the same scope. So I hope we begin quickly. I hope we make something that's easily future-proofable and easily expandable, and even though it's a little bit inconsistent with how they usually do capital budgeting here in the state, which in turn is inconsistent with how they do it in the private sector. If the cash is there, we may as well set it aside now and get started now rather than waiting a couple of years to do what's already going to be a very long project. And I know that wasn't recognized for the part about the rebate. Certainly, that's a lot simpler than that thing with collecting receipts for the gas tax. That would probably have taken more than 92 people to do. So that was like just a very complicated scheme. And this at least is simple. Whether it'll make much difference to anyone, I'll probably take the $25 and spend it on a burger and a beer at Hop and Grind in Durham. And I suppose if they also had a rooms and meals tax holiday, that would reduce the cost of my meal by another couple of bucks. But anyway, I agree. We should. It's a good plan. Let's make a good plan for the parking garage, and we may as well start sooner rather than later. And I think we should probably do a good job rather than a bad job. And hopefully, oh yes, and also I'm on the Judiciary Committee, so I've toured both the One Granite Place. That's a very beautiful facility. That certainly would be a fine home for the Department of Justice or any other state agency. And also the bank building, as others said, at least it looks nice from the outside, but it's cramped. The roof leaks. It's they do great work in there, but it's not a good, it's not a suitable situation for them. So that's both. Although maybe it keeps them humble, just like that terrible-looking parking garage keeps me a little bit humble. I drive in every morning, and I sort of know I'm really not that big a deal if I have to park my car in that place that looks like something out of a dystopia. But so let's build the new parking garage. Thanks. I can answer any questions if you still have any.
Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none. Thank you, Representative.
Thank you.
We'll next call on Deputy Commissioner Steve Lavoy from Department of Safety. Are you in a rush to go anywhere, Representative Ladd?
Yeah, I'm trying to get up to my parking lot in Haverhill.
I'll get you next.
Thank you. That's right, on the commons.
Good afternoon, Steve Lavoy, Director of Administration for the Department of Safety, and with me is Scott Breyer, the Chief of our Road Toll Bureau. First, I'd like to start by thanking Representative Umberger for listening to the concerns that the department had related to the first draft of the amendment, and for putting this amendment forward. We believe this is really a policy decision for the legislature, and so we're not taking a position for or against this. But I'm here today to really talk about the administrative component of this mechanism. So as written, there would be a rebate provided of $25 to any individual or business for each of their motor vehicle registrations. As written, this includes all registrations, so that would be trailers, motor vehicles, commercial motor vehicles, motorcycles. There are about 1.6 million registrations. During February, that number could change by the time the bill becomes effective. So we're looking at about $40 million, $40.1 million in total as it stands today. Assuming that the language in paragraph 7 is really referring to general funds, that addresses our big concern about the impact to the highway fund. So if general funds are used for this rebate, we can maintain this neutral position. If the highway fund were going to be impacted, that would be a concern for us and for any of the other departments who utilize the highway fund, because it's not the healthiest of funds from a revenue perspective. There would need to be some coordination between the DMV and the Department of Administrative Services and also the State Treasury. There'd be over 1.6 there'll probably be about over 1 million checks that would need to be processed in order for this to happen. Not sure of a time frame as of yet. We would need to coordinate with those other agencies to make sure we didn't overwhelm our existing processing systems. But there are a few pieces too that I'd offer for consideration to make this more effective from an amendment perspective. One is there should be some sort of consideration related to those administrative costs to produce those checks. In such a large quantity, postage alone is going to be over $800,000. There would also be some special check stock that I believe is utilized, and there may even be special ink toner printing related to the check stock that's used. I don't know what those costs are. Those are something that administrative services would have to help provide and weigh in on, but that is a consideration related to this bill. The other piece that has to do with the use of the term rebate. So currently registrations, they vary in amount. Some registrations can be significantly expensive and are above $25. Others, for example, a motorcycle registration is $15. So using the term rebate and then having a set amount equal to 25 brings up a few questions about whether or not a motorcycle would receive the full $25 amount or would they receive a $15 amount. There'd be a couple of options to address that. We could look for maybe different language for rebate to say it's a flat $25 fee, or if the rebate stays, we'd have to determine how do we deal with that moving into the future registration periods. Is that a credit on a customer's account if it exceeds the $15? But that can all be worked out through work sessions and other discussions. But those are the two areas that I think would be able to make this easier to administer and ensure that we could do so based on the intent of the bill. And I'm happy to address any questions that anybody might have.
Mr. Breyer, anything to add?
Just a concern about the highway fund. I would say for the administrative piece of this, just reinforce that should be paid with general funds.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Representative Griffin.
Yes, Commissioner. I wonder, are trailers going to be included, and what's the rationale if they are?
Thank you for the question. So as written, the trailers would be included. They could be excluded with a change in the language of the bill. As far as rationale, one could argue that a trailer exerts a toll on the vehicle that's pulling it, and so you would lose gas mileage and therefore consume more gas and receive some sort of a benefit related to that, or relief related to that.
Thank you.
Representative Turcott for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Lavoie, for coming today. Quick question on, I know you mentioned $800,000 for postage would be cost with checks. Do you have a rough estimate on the number of man hours that would be involved in taking care of this?
I don't at this point. We're confident that we could absorb those costs with existing staffing, but that would be the piece that we need to coordinate with the other state agencies and really true up what type of a schedule we'd be looking at. This is not something I think that we could generate overnight, and the state, I don't think, would be in a position to produce 1 million checks tomorrow. So my thought would be we're looking at over a several-month period of coordinated processing on a day-to-day basis to work through that volume.
Further questions?
Thank you. You could do it with existing staff without the necessity of going to overtime or anything like that?
There would likely need to be some overtime associated with this. How much is unknown at this point, but it all depend upon maintaining daily workloads while processing these types of this type of data.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing no further questions, thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks.
Now we'll call on Representative Ladd. Sorry for the delay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Rick Ladd. I am Chair of House Education, and I also come from Haverhill, New Hampshire. We have lots of land up there for parking. Yeah, well, we have rail up there too. So I'd like to address this amendment in terms of 1661. From the policy perspective, House Education, working with the Advisory Council on Career Technical Education, working on subcommittee, working with directors, working with business, have been working for the last 7 to 8 years, and you see the culmination of that effort with 1661. We don't want to see this bill jeopardized. Next, when I look at this amendment, and getting on to the amendment, I know that Representative Umberg would want me to talk directly to the amendment, that there's two parts basically, Section 6 and 7, and Part 8, and then with the effective dates in 9. I'm reticent, and I would be reticent on the House floor to even think of voting for Section 6 and 7. Vehicle registration rebate checks don't rise to the level of an emergency extenuating circumstance or a safety issue that the latter part of this amendment does. Now, we've had 103 bills this year in House Education. I've had my clerk, who's new, walking back to stores in the middle of the dark, which we're concerned for her safety. And we know that there's issues within the building, but just walking from here to there, that's tough for young people to do alone. There's a need to do something with stores. I agree. That is a significant emergency, extenuating circumstance and safety issue, which needs address. And I can support that. I don't think if we got the bill on the floor and had this amendment alone, in other words, divide this thing out with a new amendment, there's a stronger possibility of seeing it going forward. My chief concern is that we have a number of students throughout this state that need 1661. We have a number of businesses. Talk to the BIA, talk to the Chamber, talk to the New Hampshire Bankers Association. They're all saying, help us get more skilled people prepared for the career pathways in this state. We have a demographic problem. We can't see this one go down the toilet. So if we're going to amend it for something, do it right. Look at the issue in this latter part of this amendment, stores. I know there's a process, yes, but we have an emergency. We have extenuating, what we haven't done to this point, that's under the bridge. We need to go forward and make sure things are safe. So in conclusion, I'd like to emphasize, tear this amendment apart, get rid of part of it, and move forward with the part that we really, really need. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none. Oh, Representative Heath.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your testimony today. We don't often agree, but on this, I agree. I am really troubled by the amount of work. The garage, I completely understand. It is an emergency, and we do need to act on it. But the other element of this amendment, there are other things that I think rise to a level of much greater need in our state. I think about the Department of Ed. There are no curriculum people there. I think of Health and Human Services. I think of so many other ways that we could spend the money that we thankfully have available to us right now. So what is your feeling in terms of a better use for this money?
There are a lot of better uses. Just looking at the title of the bill, 1661, Career Tech Education. We're at the end of a round of capital improvements out there. We've gone through the 23 buildings. Now it's time, how are we going to start going back through this process? We need to look at that process, but to ensure that we have proper equipment and technology in these CTE centers, we're talking capital money. So that's just one that I can just right off the bat tell you. There's lots of them out there.
Any further from the committee members? Seeing none.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Have a good ride home. All right, before I get to the CTE testimony, I have one more person here from DOT, Kathleen Mulcahy Hampson. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Representative Weiler. Kathy Mulcahy Hampson, my privilege to appear before the committee this afternoon on behalf of the Department of Transportation as the legislative liaison and the senior hearings examiner. Madam Chair, members of the committee, the department has appreciated your support, especially the support for Madam Chair and members of Division 2 for the past several sessions, and I know you're familiar with the state of the Highway Fund. I have less to say this afternoon when the amendment changed from a road toll rebate to a registration fee rebate. But there is one issue I'd like to raise, one issue the department has with the language of the amendment. And I recognize that the amendment was very recently pulled together, and I think it perhaps is a point that was overlooked. But as drafted, it could impact the highway fund, though not intended. And Steve Lavoie and Scott Breyer from the Department of Safety touched on this, but I don't want to miss an opportunity to protect the highway fund. Amendment number 1162 specifically appropriates the general funds for the rebate checks, but there's no mention of how to pay the costs that Department of Safety would incur with the rebate check process. And the time and resources that they spend translates to money, and that money would come from the highway fund unless it's specifically stated otherwise in the amendment. I don't know how much it costs for this state to issue a check. I think it's a little cumbersome. It does cost money, and there would be 1 million checks or more issued. So we don't want that to impact the highway fund. I don't know if it would be less expensive to issue, charge $25 less at the time of registration, and I don't know what the costs involved with that would be, but it's something that perhaps the committee could look at. But I ask that in further discussions on this amendment that the costs not be incurred processing the rebate checks against the highway fund. And I thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions from the members of the committee? Representative Mooney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony. It's interesting you mentioned that about almost a discount. A discount is forward-looking. A rebate is retro. Hearing the Department of Safety talking about all these checks, manpower, overtime to process the like. Any opinions either from the Department of Safety, if I could be so bold, from the previous speaker or yourself, in terms of that alternative of a forward-looking discount for the next year when you register your vehicle as opposed to the retro rebate for everyone? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Representative Mooney. I'd have to defer to the Department of Safety. DMV is under that department, and they're familiar with the systems and the costs involved in changing those.
Any other committee member want to question? Seeing none. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Weiler.
Okay, now I have the remaining pink cards from people with the career technical education. We'll call first on Chris Dodge from the Salem Education. And Honorable McGuire wants to speak as well about that.
About the rebate.
Okay, I'll come to you afterwards. All right, Mr. Dodge, welcome to Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, committee members, for hearing my testimony today. I'll be brief. As someone who worked a lot of hours working with the CTE Tuition and Transportation Committee on the original bill and the original text of the bill, and someone who's been in the trenches with CTE for 15 years now, really trying to advance some of these challenges, particularly with calendar alignment and embedded credit without getting into the bill text. I was really surprised that we took a really nice clean bill and now we've really muddied the waters, and it's gone from being the CTE bill to being the parking garage bill or the rebate bill. So I have concerns in that regard. I don't doubt that facility, based on what I'm hearing today, is in dire need of replacement, and I'm not in opposition to that. But my concern is that we've taken a bill that sailed through House Education and was expected to sail through this committee with minimal financial burden, and now we've attached a significant amount of money to it. So my concern is that what is the fate of this bill going to be now based on this amendment? And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Dodge, if I could allay some of your fears from my experience when we put in these non-germane amendments, it's generally on a very safe bill that we don't think anybody wants to kill. So that's one of the reasons why it gets amended to a bill that's on its way safely. We add things to it, and they can always be amended out.
Thank you.
So in my opinion, there's no need to be fearful of CTE and what you've worked on so hard. And I appreciate the time you've spent on that, because
Thank you.
I agree with you. We need to encourage it more.
And just bearing in mind that some of the language in this bill is a game changer for us as part of that. So thank you.
And we'll make sure it moves. Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, we'll next call on Steve Rothberg for the, also a CTE supporter.
Good afternoon. My name is Steve Rothenberg. I'm the principal at the Korean Technical Center here in Concord. I don't need to hash over what was said already. This bill has some themes in it that position Korean technical education not for today but for a number of years. The concept of embedded credits is very, very important. It changes the way students think about high school, whether they can earn English credits and math credits in the area they're going to focus on. And I'll remind the committee, and Representative Weil, I appreciate what you said a minute ago. So there are 14,000, give or take, graduates every year in New Hampshire, which is obviously seniors mostly. Of those, there's 9,500 Korean technical kids in the state of New Hampshire. So out of 28,000 students who are juniors and seniors plus or minus, 9,500 are Korean technical education. So when we start talking about money and investments, investing in those 9,500 students, which represents a significant portion of New Hampshire high school students, is huge. And this little bill, and I appreciate what you said earlier, Representative Weiler, and I know Representative Berger is very passionate about it too, and there are other folks here who've been very involved, how important it is to build a new building, give the rebates. This is not my comment. Matter of fact, building a building would be great because our construction students will have places to work. But in a larger sense, it's just so important that this bill continues on and is seen as a separate entity, whatever necessary to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Rothenberg, Principal Rothenberg. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your input. Bill McGuire, did you want to add anything?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So first of all, just briefly to speak to Representative Ladd's point, I think that it's likely, this is not likely to cause a problem in the House in the sense that if ought to pass with amendment doesn't go through, I would think that the Speaker would allow you to divide the question and vote separately on sections 1 through 5 and the other sections and so on. It still is a possible problem when it gets to the governor because he can either only veto the whole thing or not. But as far as the House goes, I don't think it's a serious problem. And obviously the Senate is used to dealing with bills of multiple issues, so it might be worth giving them a little of their own back. But anyways, but I wanted to speak, I came here today prepared to speak against the original reduction for the exact same reason that the Department of Safety objected to it, because it's easy to see that the highway fund is going to be in trouble in the next budget cycle, right? The cost of gas is way up. That means the cost of asphalt is up, the cost of diesel is up, and so on. And also people will be driving less, so the gas tax revenues will be down. You don't have to be Norm Major to figure that out, right? So anything that hurts the highway fund is something you want to stay off of this year. But if it's strictly general funds, then it's certainly up to you how you spend them and whatever. I mean, there's plenty of other places to do things with the general funds, but including leaving them for the next budget. So, but that's up to you. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none. Anybody else wishes to add anything to any portion of House Bill 1661? Seeing none, I will close the hearing at 3:30 on 1661. Thank you all.
Okay, Division 2, we'll see you down there. I'll be there in about 5 minutes.